and thank you for joining us on yet another edition of the Rebound series. My name is Farai Mwakutia, and I'm your host. Today, we are focusing on media. We're coming off the back of World Press Freedom Day and also celebrating a key milestone in the history of one of the flagships of the Alpha Media Holdings Group, that is the Zimbabwe Independent, which celebrated its 25th anniversary, its silver jubilee, after hitting the streets of Zimbabwe on May the 10th in 1996. In view of those two events, we thought we'd focus on media and the role that the media plays in terms of national development, also focusing on the state of media in Zimbabwe at this point in time, and what the future holds. What sort of media do we need in the future? What will be the shape and form of that media in the future? And is Zimbabwe prepared for the changes that lie ahead? To discuss that, I am joined by two gentlemen, both named Nigel. So Nigel squared. Let me begin with Nigel Nyamutumbu, who is the coordinator of the Media Alliance of Zimbabwe. Nigel, great to have you on the program.
Sure, it's a pleasure being here.
And alongside him is the founder of 263 Chat, Nigel Mugamo. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. Let me begin with you, Nigel. Media Alliance. You obviously sit in a position where you work with, you deal with, you are engaged with a number of players in the media industry. Let's start by looking at the state of the media at this point in time. From a general point of view, what is the state of Zimbabwe's media?
Well, first, let me begin by congratulating the Zimbabwe Independent for 25 years in an industry that is not necessarily easy, conditions that do not necessarily make journalism thrive. Obviously, the narrative and discourse within the 25 years has significantly shifted from an era in which there was relative, free media. At one point when the Zimbabwe Independent started, you did not even have a statutory media regulatory body, as is the case now. You did not have laws that would directly inhibit and impact cases of journalism, safety, and then so forth were relatively on the low. The economy could support entrepreneurs, could support new business in terms of the media. But you look 25 years on, which is also this year, 30th anniversary of the Windhoek Declaration, which brought about World Press Freedom Day. 30 years on, the state of the media in Zimbabwe is still not quite ideal. It's not yet within the tenets of the Windhoek Declaration. When you look at media diversity, when you look at media pluralism, when you look at media sustainability, when you look at the media policy framework, when you look at the operating environment, broadly speaking, yes, there have been some incremental changes, some gains, some positives and development, the emergence of new media, emergence of new startups, including 263 Chat here and other forums. But by and large, we still have quite a restrictive environment in terms of the whole spectrum, law, economic, social, political. We also even have an elephant in the room in the form of media capture.
Indeed. We'll come back and talk about that. You mentioned, obviously, that there have been startups that have come along the way. Nigel, 263 Chat. Startup, you came back from abroad, came back and started this venture. 25 years ago, when the likes of the Zimbabwe Independent were launched, were operating very different environment. Economy was a lot better. Loans and funding were available. How has the experience been for you starting up in an environment like this?
It's been tough. I mean, it's a tough business environment. We're a for-profit organization. We rely on services that we offer. Advertising, multimedia services that we offer various clients. We need a functional economy that enables businesses to advertise with us. We need an environment where business loans are afforded. So it's been afforded to organizations like us. But it's tough. It's been a tough road. This is our 9th year, and we still operate like a startup. We look at like you guys, all this fancy equipment. We want to be like the Zim independent. We want to celebrate 25 years and congratulations to them. But it's been a tough road. Obviously COVID and various other things have made it harder. But we also recognize the reason why I started 263 Chat is there was a gap in the market. We obviously, as you know, my brother Nigel so alluded to, we live in a highly polarized, highly politicized environment. And we saw a gap and thought, look, if we come in the middle and just plant ourselves there and sort of tell the truth the way we see it, maybe we'll survive. And touch wood, we've survived thus far. But it's tough. My beard is getting gray and gray every day, as you can tell.
So the point you've just mentioned there, and I'll ask you first, where you are saying, the economy has not performed, well, it poses challenges. Therein brings a question, I suppose, that many people want to ask in terms of, is the media or are media players selling their souls to the corporate world? That it's all about making the money, about paying the rent, and perhaps not about telling the news or focusing on certain aspects of the news?
It's, when I did a last count, maybe last year or the year before that, I looked at the online space. There were over 30 publications, or 30 online publications. And these include mainstream media. So I'm including, Zim Independent, and so forth. That, you have to ask yourself, how are these publications surviving, right? Some of them don't have, are not a for-profit organization. Some of them have various business models that, that are difficult to understand from the outside, right? So to say that we are all selling our souls, I think it's a bit of a stretch. There are some who are, and I think those of us in the room will know, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. But we also remember, we are the reason why we created these entities is to tell the news, to educate and share what's going on, and that's still the focus of what we're trying to do. That's still why I get up in the morning. Look, let's go tell the story of Zimbabwe, right? To do that, we need resources, and so we obviously our business model changes and shifts as the economy shifts and changes. But there are certainly people out there who are taking the money from clients and are not worried about ethics. They're not worried about the harm that they do when they publish. They're not worried. They're not worried about being called fake news. There are publications like that, both based here in Zimbabwe and in the diaspora.
What is to be done to organizations like that, Nigel, very quickly? Should they be shut down because they are peddlers of false news, or should they be afforded their right to publish, their freedom of publishing what they want, and whoever wants to read it will read it, and those who don't won't?
Well, you can't really dictate what one may be persuaded to put out there, and obviously as a proponent of free expression and as someone who advances media freedom and so forth, I would not advocate or call for the shutting down for instance. That I don't think that is a way of ensuring that there is a credible media. I think what is of essence is that as we in the media business, what we sell is basically credible information. What we put out there is to say, hey, there is this development that is unfolding. We mitigate information. We try and interpret the various contestations that will be occurring between the governors and those that are being governed. We try to mitigate and interpret the crisis. We try to make our audiences, appreciate what is happening within them so that they make informed decisions. So what we're essentially selling is real, we're saying I'm reliable, I'm credible. And what is I'm putting onto the market, into the marketplace of ideas, is something that is worth someone's dollar. It's something that is worth someone's attention or a view or whatever. And what is the challenge now we are facing is instead of there being a media that is being, that is anchoring its trust on credible, selling credible information, and so forth, we now have at times a media which is actually now being either sponsored or which is now being influenced to propagate certain narratives. And it's not just within the framework or context of an established media house. It can be also in terms of trolls, in terms of organized people to say, Varakashi,
Twitter warriors,
or Twitter warriors, or whatever they could be called. But for me, nothing beats our greatest form of defense is professionalism, ethical journalism, credible information, going beyond the sensational, going beyond just the ordinary news, but to actually really demonstrate how this news relates to the price of bread, relates to the economic, and to resonate with a citizen who just is going about. So what is to be done? Let us go back to the democratic regulatory frameworks of the media, that is self-regulation. Let us safeguard our profession. People often say journalism has gone to the dogs. I often argue at times it is the dogs that have come to journalism. Let us safeguard that space, because ultimately nothing is going to beat independent, credible, reliable, accurate, balanced journalism.
Nigel, what's your take on that? Very quickly on what we've just heard there.
No, I agree with what he's saying. I like the part where he says journalism hasn't gone to the dogs. The dogs have actually come in. That's true. He speaks of sponsored media. That is certainly happening. You have to ask yourself, I think as a discerning, and I think we should all be discerning consumers of media. You know what I mean? The reason why we were discussing this right now is, I spoke about fake news and what do we do with those people. Sadly, there's an appetite for fake news. There are people the consumers, who will share it. They'll share it in your WhatsApp group, in your family WhatsApp group, in your old boys WhatsApp group, and yet they know it's fake. You know what I mean? So there's clearly an opportunity there for training, to train the general public to say, this is a fake story. So instead of looking at what he's saying and saying, the situation is bad, I tend to look at it, say, there's an opportunity.
Indeed.
There's an opportunity to play a role, whether it's the Media Alliance or whoever, to educate and regularly do it and train with the citizens.
Talking about opportunities, we'll talk about a lot more of those when we return. It is the Rebound series today, focusing on the media industry. Stay tuned. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. The Rebound series continues today, focusing on the media industry. Nigel Mugamu, founder of 263 Chat, is one of my guests. Before we went to the break, you did say that there is an appetite for some of these fake news sites, the fake news that we see. Let me bring in this point, and it has been made rather controversially, and people have different thoughts on this, that, you know, some of the fake news, some of the trivial content that we see people consuming is actually what people want to read, and not serious developmental issues. Do you get that sense?
Yes, I get it. I mean, I work on the business side of 263 Chat. There's the editorial team. Just to give an example, they'll come and say, look, we'd like some little budget, we want to go to Goromonzi to do a story. I'll find a budget, the team will go. We've done a great story about this lady who's farming or whatever the issue is. It's a really great story. We'll come and publish the story, and we won't get the hits that we think it deserves. But artist X has an affair with artist X or XY's wife. That story will be the talk of the town for that day, right? But when you compare the two stories, I believe the Goromonzi story is a better story. And yet, what people really wanted was to know, how did X get caught? You understand what I'm saying?
And who else?
And who else was involved? How long has it been going on for? You see, so that tells you something. We haven't cracked it. We're not the only media house that's struggling with that, but certainly this is what we've seen.
Is this what we have become as a nation? Perhaps this is who we have become. And perhaps another question is, does the media have a role then in ensuring that we try and change that by perhaps not focusing on those stories and giving more prominence to these ones?
Well, I think it's not necessarily what we have become per se. Obviously, in terms of news value and news stories, normally what there are these fresh sort of like fresh bands and then there are those stories where you properly brood them, you properly, go. You find that, these hot cakes may just, they're fly by night. They're event based. After all, I think for us, there are two opportunities here. For number one, to really continue to invest in investigative sort of journalism, in going to unpack to use the Goromonzi story example, to not make it seem as if it's an event. We have just seen a great farming project and then so forth, and then that's it. But to sort of have some sustained process engagement within the media, within the communities, within the economy, within the corporate sector, within all the facets of our lives, whether health and so forth. And then, obviously, on the other side of opportunity is information literacy. And I think it has to begin at primary, at school level, because I think our curriculums, what they are now lacking is to be in sync with what is happening currently. I think we still think that our lives will continue to just exist as they were when geography maths was put in place, when now most of our lives are online. Our economic activity is online, social activity, all our politics, everything within the component of our life. But are we fully equipped to be discerning? Are we fully equipped to be able to deceive? Are we secure? Are we even, protected insofar as our rights online are concerned? And I see an opportunity there for us to assist people to be able to fact check, because yes, there is an appetite of these sensational. I mean, it's like a big bang where you want to get in and feel. But most of this, there is also now that flip side where you can say, hang on. What site is this? Is this site credible? This source is credible? Is this, something that is fact-checked and so forth. And there is that opportunity, and it can begin even at a school level.
Nigel, from the 263 side, do you think, the question I put to him, how do we try, is it us trying to then develop, nurture the audience so that you give more prominence to, or you boost the Mutoko farmer story and not the...
No, it's not really, I mean, let people decide for themselves. But like what he was saying, let us try and link, because you have to remember the context that we're living in. Zimbabwe, things aren't great, okay? People want to escape. Maybe the story of artist X is the escape, I can focus on artist X and leave my, depressed life alone for 2 minutes. This Mutoko story or Goromonzi, that reminds me of my grandmother, my guru. It's too close to home, maybe. Maybe it's the way we unpack the story, right? Maybe we're talking too much about the success and not necessarily the struggle. It's maybe how we package the story. So there's many facets to this thing. And like what he's saying, I don't think we should tell the story in isolation. Let's explain maybe how she struggled. I'm assuming it's a she. How she struggled, how she then found this piece of land, how she then found the inputs. The kids weren't going to school and now they are. Let's use this story and really flesh it out, for what it is. Let's give some statistics. I'm an old ex-accountant, now journalist. Let's put some numbers. Let's talk about, irrespective of where you are education-wise, you understand numbers.
Yeah.
If you give a statistic to say, there are 52,000 people in Goromonzi, out of those 52,000 people, 30,000 of them are farmers. There's not enough land, but the opportunity is there. It's an exciting way of telling a story. I've recently been trying to personally get involved in infographics within the team, putting, just telling the story of, hey, where's our fuel in the region? I did that in March. Yeah. Where's our fuel in the region? It's a very simple way of presenting and saying, but duragabana. You know what I mean? And also remember, attention span.
Yeah.
Our attention span, I mean, look at TikTok. TikTok is what, 30 minutes, 30 seconds. Yeah, right? We don't have time to watch a 60-minute video, 10 minutes.
True.
We literally want, if I can say it in Shona, that's literally, ga. Let's get to the point. Even at family funerals, but ingoti ga. That's what you want. So there's the issue of getting straight to the point, which is also linked to data and access. I'd like to know how many people lost access to the internet during COVID because maybe they weren't working, or maybe their salary was halved, maybe, etc., etc. Those will inform you probably why artist X story gets more hits.
Because now someone is filtering to say, you know what, I will only, this one looks exciting, I will sacrifice my data on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let me bring, it now brings me to the next point I wanted to talk about, where, he's talking about access to statistics and things like that. Sometimes as media, we try to extract this information, which resides in official offices or in government departments, or to get a comment, and it's very difficult. The engagement between media and government, from your perspective, hasn't perhaps been the best, or in the past. Going forward, how do we fix that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I respond to your question, a whole lot of these, metrics and challenges that we've been discussing are hinged on what I would term perhaps, external, the external operating environment. So, for instance, and these are real critical issues. We're saying we're talking about the media having moved online, or the media needing to say have investigative journalism. But number one, do our audiences actually have that access to the internet? Can they afford the internet? Is it available? We were talking of investigating the story and so forth. It's not easy, say, for a startup to be able to invest, to say, hey, here is fuel money, drive to Goromonzi for 5 days, and we can support your journalism. You would obviously look at the costs vis-a-vis what may then be generated. It may be faster and easier to just get that quick story, and you're out. So all those are external that really need. So when we talk of media reforms, or when we often say no, let's do away with IPA, let's do away with the Broadcasting Services Act, we are talking to these lived examples, and to also further talk to your question around access to information. We now have a Freedom of Information Act in place, which is great that we now have a law that compels every government to proactively disclose information. I mean, it is not the citizen that should be pursuing a right. The right should pursue a citizen. So information should just be there. I don't need to constantly be checking how many people have now been vaccinated, how many vaccines are in the country, and so forth. It should just be information that is readily available. But two things. Number one, we are not yet at a stage where we've been able to really test the law. And by testing the law, I mean to use the provisions of this law as journalists or as citizens to say, I am now demanding this law, and if I'm denied, I'm going to appeal to the Zimbabwe Media Commission. If I'm denied, again, I can take the case to the High Court. Then secondly, we also need to now deal with the question of culture. There's still that culture of secrecy within both, our, especially in public, but also even in the private sector, where everything has to have, bottlenecks, bureaucracy, and it's the whole chain is just meant to frustrate. You need to just be connected to even just access a birth certificate or a birth record, or to access any other information. And we ought to deal with the culture. Yes, we now have a better law in place. We've got the Freedom of Information Act, but I think we also still have a long way for us to test it, and also to change a culture of secrecy to a culture of transparency.
Culture of secrecy, culture of almost media and journalists being demonized whenever you are seen. I mean, it goes back to the period you mentioned where you are saying you are sellouts, murukutengesa nyika, amongst others. We'll come back and talk about those things and a whole lot more. But I think going forward, to focus now more on how the media can break down some of those barriers, how the media can portray an image of Zimbabwe to Zimbabweans and beyond, and help in terms of building the nation. The Rebound series will be back shortly. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. It is the Rebound series. Nigel Nyamutumbu is the coordinator for Media Alliance of Zimbabwe. Now, as we head towards wrapping up this discussion, I want to focus on, the key things that we must do going forward. And so earlier you spoke about the fact that the environment may not be ideal. We hear government constantly saying, and we've seen them, they've licensed new TV stations. They continue to license community radio stations. I think the other day I was reading Harare Polytechnic is now also got a campus radio stations. These are steps in the right directions. Yes. What more do we need to do?
Yes, we need to, number one, ensure that these licensed players are equipped, supported to be able to act independently, to be able to produce content in a manner that will tell the Zimbabwean story. And by that I mean we need to ensure that there are mechanisms in place that they are sustainable, that they they have the necessary equipment to be able to broadcast, to be able to stream. There is skills support for journalists that are properly trained, journalists that are properly equipped, and there is that support for independent players. You note that they have been a license, but there's also have been concerns around some of the actors in terms of media ownership and so forth. That there's a lot of state actors, state agents, and I think we now need to outgrow that in an era where they are multiplicity of actors. We need to grow to a point where the state does not become a referee and a player at the same time, and then that we've got a liberal licensing framework that would then just ensure that when you've got the necessary funding, the necessary support, you're able to produce. We still need to deal with the long-standing issues of reforms within the legislative framework. We need to have core regulation in place, support for self-regulation, that journalists can act independently without fear that they could be arrested. So we need to do away with the provisions that make it seem as if journalism is being criminalized, or that journalism can seem to be a crime. We need to obviously also look at our operating environment, the police and journalist relationship, the journalist and security apparatus of the country's relationship. They should just be able to operate freely. And we need to see a decreased number of violations against the media. But I think also broadly going forward, we need to deal broadly with the question of capture within the media to ensure that there is diversity in terms of the
Define
content.
what you mean by capture.
Capture, essentially what we mean is the entrenchment of the state, entrenchment of any other actor. In the case of Zimbabwe, it will be the state within the operations of the media. An over influence in terms of ownership, in terms of content, in terms of staffing, in terms pretty much the whole spectrum. And it is indeed clear, even based on the discourse around the licensing, for instance, of the television stations, or in terms of broadly when you look at legacy media in Zimbabwe, you see that there is that in entrenchment. So we need to obviously deal with that, but we also need pretty much to support alternative media platforms like this, because they ought to be sustainable. It's good that they are coming up, but they need an environment at a policy, at an economic, at a structural level to be supported for them to be viable.
Now, let me turn to you, the other Nigel. The point that has just been made there, where he's referring to what is called alleged state capture. I think one of the concerns that I have heard certainly is that perhaps this is being done, or why there is the sentiment, is the fact that it is because the independent media or other platforms do not portray the country in a positive image out there, that this whole kutengesa nyika and giving a bad image. What is the role that you can play in building a nation, do you think?
Look, I think we're storytellers. We're telling the story of what is happening in Zimbabwe on a daily basis. So we're not making it up. If you want to buy US dollars at the bank at interbank rate, can you do that? You can't, right? But if we go on the street and I talk to Mkoma Solo, it's 125, 130, is it not, right now? Right? If we say that, are we anti-Zimbabwe? No. We're simply saying that's what's going on. You see? If we then go to Vic Falls or any tourist site, we've got lots of beautiful tourist attractions, and we take pictures and we put those online. That's also telling the story. And we're also encouraging people to come and visit us. But the reality is that story, that positive, come and visit, Wangé National Park, is not going to get, once again, it goes back to that previous point I made about what are people wanting to consume. The reality is most people are not going to Wangé National Park. Most people are dealing with Kumasolo of some kind, right? And so that story is going to resonate with people. We mustn't forget, Zimbabweans are not stupid. Yes, they're not stupid. They understand the reality. And we can't, if you want to attract business, like in our case, if you want to attract business from specific type of players, maybe listed companies or whatever, they will look at your content. They will look at what kind of content you publish. It has to be real. It has to be based on what is really happening. Okay, and it's good and bad. That's why they've agreed to put the advert on your website, right? If it's too positive, that's also not the truth, because we're not living in a very, very positive country. We are struggling. Yes, inflation is dropping, but we have inflation in triple digits. So the reality is, there are so many things that we're trying to do as the media to portray Zimbabwe for what it is. Sometimes there are positive things that the government is doing. But once again, it goes to that previous point we're talking about in terms of access to that information. Specific players. I can tell you right now, the national budget will be announced. I'm sure you've experienced this. It will be announced, and it's usually in November. It'll be at 2:30 p.m. But the state media would have written the story by 3 p.m. Right? They've got access to the budget document. We haven't. We're waiting for the document like everybody else. So how then can we compete when they're trying to tell the positive side of the story? We also want to tell the side, but we're forced to rush. Finance minister says, budget deficit or budget surplus. So there's some operational challenges. So let's equalize, let's make it equal for everybody. Let's, like he said, let's find ways of sustaining us. And also to, a blanket to say, you new players are all anti-Zimbabwe. No. We live and operate in Zimbabwe. We have a CR14. We pay our taxes. We're not running away. We're here. I could easily run this thing from South Africa, but I don't. I live here.
Which brings me to a question I was going to ask to both of you. Nigel, you were speaking about the reforms, the need for regulation and things like that. Do we not overstate the importance or significance of regulation in an environment such as it's just described, where someone can be online, publishing from anywhere in the world, posting their videos, writing their stories? Is the role of the regulator still therefore that important if people have that freedom to do what they can and are doing from anywhere they are?
Which is why we are proponents of a free market system, a free market of ideas and self-regulation, which is why we emphasize information literacy. I'm often quite surprised that when we talk of cyber legislation, we immediately think of fake news and so forth, when it is the real broader issues that have to do, say, with the citizen's right to privacy, because a lot of these platforms are actually not based here. So even if we want to regulate, we will not be able to. But these are platforms that know our movements. These are platforms that know my preferences, and these are platforms that these multinational and big international corporates can use my information for commercial purposes, and without them being transparent. Which is why even in the context of World Press Freedom Day, in the revised Windhoek Declaration, there was that whole discussion on the transparency online and so forth. So for us, we must not try and pursue to say, well, there is someone who has written a story which we did not want published, or someone has an earth corruption, or someone has put out a story that is not necessarily positive. Therefore, we should try and regulate them. That is backdated. That is no more in the context and frame of new democratic societies. That is no more in the frame and context of how we ought to be living and operating. You know, there are other real critical issues that we ought to be, you know, pursuing to protect the very same citizen. And to just, you know, also, and I like the analogy that you were giving, Nigel, there about when you see, journalism is not to just report or unearth corruption for the sake of it, or to report, to use the example that the rate is actually not at 88, it's actually at 130. It is so that it prompts, which is why the media is called the fourth estate. It prompts legislators, it prompts the judiciary, it prompts the executive, it prompts even the citizen to fact-driven action, to then say, okay, so how do we address? Oh, there has been unearthed corruption within the COVID fund, or there is unearthed, shortages or water pollution, whatever negative story that may seem. That is not being anti-Zimbabwean. That is, if anything, that is being very pro-Zimbabwean, because you are calling upon either the citizens, even corporate actors, for them to actually act and get things addressed, to get the country, working normally, to get, citizens to live. So it's not just to say, no, because bad news or negative news sells. No, that is the essence of journalism.
Nigel Mugamu, way forward, you mentioned there are at least 30 other players in your space. Going forward, are you confident of this future, and what do you think needs to be done as priorities for media to be viable and relevant?
Look, I think we just need, for me, at a personal level, we need an environment where there's policy consistency. We want policy consistency attracts investors. We need a healthy economy. We know that we've got the ingredients. We're a wealthy country. We're not a poor country. Right? So what we need is leadership where consistent policies. I want to be able to plan December and say, okay, can we give the team a bonus? And what will the rate really be in December? But I can't tell you that right now. I can't tell you what payroll looks like in May. The companies that owe us money, it's not that they don't want to pay. It's a tough business environment. So we need to fix those fundamentals and stop lying to ourselves about that things are okay. Some things are okay, some things are not. So we need a plan. People don't, even at a family level, I don't think people mind if there isn't jam in the fridge, right, this week. As long as you can assure them that there'll be jam in the fridge next week on Tuesday. So if we're going to go through this tough time, let's understand how long this period is going to last for, right? And then let's work towards that, and let's fix that. There are some positive things that are going on. Now, I look at the vaccination rollout. Countries like South Africa. I've got friends and family in South Africa saying, I should just come home. And I've said, come home. Come home and get vaccinated. So there are positive things, but ultimately, for me, sitting where I sit, I need a healthy business environment that ensures that all of us, at our various levels, whether you're a farmer, a miner, or in the media, there's a bright future ahead. And the regulatory issues? Look, we've had in the last couple of years, we've had issues with the powers that be. 2019, our office was tear gassed by the police. Last year, one of our journalists was arrested. This year, our same journalist was beaten by the police. So those incidents shouldn't be happening. As a Zimbabwean citizen, I'm ashamed that that's the country we live in. I'm raising kids in an environment where the powers that be think it's okay to do that to us as media. What he's saying about regulation, to me, I look at the cyber bill as an example. It's less about regulating us and more about protecting me as a citizen. You, as far as cannot just say, you can't insult, you shouldn't be able to insult me online and get away with it, or say anything that's defamatory. There should be consequences for that action. And so I believe that let's look at the regulation in that way. I think that we should also, let's look at where we want to be as a country. Let's look at what other countries are doing. Do we need to be to have these what they call draconian laws?
Draconian, yeah.
Yes, we don't need that. That's not progressive. That doesn't help us as a country. There's a vision 2030. What does that vision say? And then what are we doing today to ensure that we get to that vision that they set out for us? So I want a situation where there's less regulation and more transparency. The media players that you're talking about, you look at the radios, we've got one radio station in this country. This is 2021. What does that say? You guys, to one TV station. What does that say? Us guys as we had to, we had to reverse engineer AMH to come up with a 263 model. You know what I mean? You guys as Heart and Soul, you're having to re-engineer, reverse engineer what a TV station looks like to come up with the way that you're distributing your content. You should have a TV license. You should have a TV license right now.
Well, we certainly hope that more will be issued going forward as we work towards this environment that will make media both viable but also an active and supportive and relevant player in the development of Zimbabwe. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. This is the Rebound series. Now, earlier I was speaking to Nigel Mugamu and Nigel Nyamutumbu, focusing on the issues that are affecting the media industry and how they feel we can move the industry forward so it can start to play that role in national development. Now my focus shifts to something that is very topical in the media industry, and that is the role of women in that sector. To discuss this and unpack those issues, I'm joined by the Director of Media Monitors, and her name is Patience Zirima. Welcome to the program, Patience.
Thank you, Farai.
Now, let me begin there. That very point I made where the role of women in media. Some people have gone as far as suggesting that the media industry has for a very long time been an old boys club. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that, both in terms of the people who are employed in the media sector and the kind of content that we actually see in the media sector. So yes, it has been, I don't know about all boys, but yes, definitely it has been a boys club, especially when we see how there's a very low number of women in the media, very few women. We are beginning to see a lot more women coming into positions of influence in the media sector, where we see I think the Sunday Mail has got a female editor now. The Zimbabwe Independent, one of our biggest private newspapers, has got a female editor now. But this is something that we hadn't seen in a very long time. And even if we have these women in these key positions, we see that we have very few women in other positions, where we are looking at line editors, for example. We are looking at female journalists themselves. So we, as young women come from universities and colleges, we see, almost equal numbers, even more women enrolling for media studies, for example, in journalism. But as they get into the media sector, there are so few women that make it or stay in the media industry, and even fewer as we get to the top. In terms of content, I think this is. Yeah.
Why is that? Why is it that, as you quite rightly say, there seems to be this bottleneck, equal numbers from tertiary institutions, but then the numbers whittle down?
There are a lot of reasons for this, but one of the main ones is that the media environment is considered largely unfriendly for women. And we have policies that are there, but that are not friendly to women. that look at the different roles that women play in the society that men sometimes do not play. We have issues, for example, women will have children at some point, and we have media house policies that are not very friendly, not very family friendly in terms of actually allowing women to be mothers and be journalists at the same time. The times that they need to work, the work that they need to put in. You know, sometimes you can be asked to stay for a story on weekends or up to 10 or 11 p.m. and you've got a young baby at home. And especially for young women, this is actually a big issue that they face. And this lack of policies that actually allow women to be mothers and to be workers as well create those problems. There are other cultural issues or barriers within our, maybe I can say, traditions, not even culture, where if you're a married woman, to be in the media sector, for example, becomes quite problematic. Where you're working in an all-male space, for example, or a largely dominated male space, it becomes problematic to your marriage. Where have you been? Where have you been? Where you have to be accountable to other people, not just your husband, sometimes your in-laws as well. To say, oh, so you actually have a wife who's working in the media. She works with all these women and all these men, and it becomes quite problematic within a family setup. And we also have an issue that's always been talked about in terms of harassment, where women have faced a lot of harassment. You find very high numbers of women who can tell you that they have faced harassment, especially sexual harassment, from their colleagues, from male bosses, from their sources. You're going out there, you're trying to interview someone for a story, and you're harassed. They ask you for something. Well, what do you give me? I can give you my story, but what do you want? And your editor's waiting for a story. What do you do? So there are a lot of issues that women face that create those bottlenecks. And I think that means that there are so much fewer women, especially as they try to get to the top in influential positions in the media.
The point you were making earlier was on content, which is also, I think, it's one thing to look at the representation of women in the newsroom, but the actual stories that are carried by the media.
Someone used to make this analogy in my earlier days in journalism. If an alien dropped from Mars today and they looked at a newspaper, what would they see? What if they would probably see 70% to 80%? They'll think Earth is made up of 70% men, maybe 30 or 20% women. You have men who are in politics, women who are caregivers in the home, because in a lot of cases, women will always be referred to as mother. You have those issues. So you think that women carry the stereotypical roles that we put them or we represent them in the media. If we look at the different fields in society, the media is also a mirror of what we see in society, and that mirror shows us what is important. What is it that we should focus our attention on? And if we look at it that way, we then start realizing how problematic it is if we stereotype women. We put women in these roles, or we put men in certain roles. That means that we carry forward these stereotypes into our everyday lives, into policy making, into decision making around our politics, around the economy, around the different issues that we're faced as a society. So there are also those big issues when we're looking at how the media itself represents women. And I'll take it back to policy again. A lot of the issues that we face might be solved by the different policies that we as newsroom put in place. What is our editorial policy? What are we saying about who we interview as journalists? What are we saying about how we put across women? What kind of pictures, how we represent women? I'll just take an example right now. Since we're on AMH, from the AMH table, if we look at the front page of the newspaper today, we have a headline. Apologies for this, but I'll use this as an example. Hands off Grace Mugabe. So if you look at it, you're thinking, okay, who is Grace? You can be forgiven to think that Grace is a very young girl that you're talking to using her first name. She is. It's very, very rare that you would find the same way of describing men. And maybe I will just go further to your second page. And this is just to make a point. The second page says media should be apolitical. So you already have two different ways that we're representing two very relatively powerful people in our society. One is a former first lady and a politician in her own right. I suppose she's Grace, and we've got a media owner who's Ngube here. And so in terms of how we just represent women in our content, how exactly are we putting women across in a manner that actually maintains the kind of respect or allows women to aspire to be more, or to just be more in our society. And this comes from how the media sometimes represents the different genders in their stories.
Okay, so I don't want us to be sidetracked and to focus on, I mean, on the example you make. I think you make a very good example. I just wanted to chime in and say, could it therefore not be a representation of just how well known and how popular she is, that you actually don't need to go into the second name, just merely saying Grace. Similarly, I mean, perhaps that's just how prominent she is.
We could say that, but I've had that experience personally, where if there was a panel between myself and another male, I've been on panels like that, and invariably you'll find I'm always referred to especially, you know, and I've been on panels where it's very, very rare for you to hear people saying the same things to men. It's yes, it could be she is well known. I take that away from her, but there are those issues in terms of how we see women, how we see ourselves, and how we choose to address the different genders as we are, and what it means. I think we need to be a little bit more conscious as media practitioners when we are just representing women and the roles that they play in the society.
You said earlier that to fix this, because ultimately what we want to do is focus on how we can fix the solutions. You said it's about policies, editorial policies, and things around that. Is that actively happening, or are those just recommendations you make that perhaps fall on deaf ears? Are we making progress?
There has been some progress. There has been some work that has been done. I won't take that away from media houses. There have been policies in terms of HR policy itself, in terms of editorial policy. In many cases, you will hear media houses actually saying they do have a policy. I will be lying if I say that I've had sight of these policies, but in my interactions with editors, with owners or CEOs of the different media houses, they do indicate that they do have policies. They've worked with different organizations like Gender and Media Connect, like Women in News, to be able to come up with editorial policies and HR policies that are friendly to women, that actually promote women in the workspace, that promote gender or gendered content in the media. But I think when it comes to ensuring that these policies are really put into practice, maybe that's where we do have a gap. When we have a policy, how do we effectively ensure that we implement it? We follow up, effectively ensuring that these things happen. Is great. Policies are statements of intent, pretty much. You have a statement sometimes of intent. Yes, we are gender sensitive, but what does it mean in practice? Are there policies, for example, when we're looking at HR, are there policies that allow women to be mothers and to be in the workspace? Are we cognizant of the family setup that we have, the family setups that we have generally, and what this means for women in the workspace? Are we taking into consideration and actually putting in place mechanisms around harassment? Internationally, we've got policies around sexual harassment, for example. Nationally, we've got laws against sexual harassment. Even in the newsrooms themselves, I'm sure there are those policies. But when there's no mechanism that actually protects women, for example, if I go and report my case, who am I reporting to? Do I have an ear? What is done about my report when I bring it to my editor or to the CEO or to HR? All those issues, implementation issues, will need to be sorted out before we can actually see a change in the media sector.
Now, just moving away a bit from the gender issue, but just looking at the media itself as we wrap up here, going into the future, how do you think the media can be improved or managed better so that it starts to play a more active and significant role in terms of national development?
I think when we're looking at the media, there are key principles in terms of what we need to be as media. We need to have a media that is very professional, that is fair, accurate, balanced. And then we've got issues around independence of the media. Our constitution goes deep into these issues to say that we have freedom of the media, we've got freedom of expression, but we need to see greater independence of especially state-owned media. The constitution is clear about that. We need to see that greater independence. We need to ensure a media that is fair, a media that actually is professional in terms of how they work. We need to see greater diversity, and the constitution talks about licensing of, especially in the broadcasting sector, ensuring that there is that licensing that goes on. So when we are looking at what we need to be doing as the media sector, there are a lot of issues we need to deal with, but they are based on those principles as set out in the constitution.
How realistic? Because I think the reality of the issue is that these media outlets know where their bread is buttered. These editors and these personnel know that, unfortunately, if they don't report a certain way or cover certain things, they may not have a job at the end of the day. How realistic are those principles that you speak about that are enshrined in the Constitution in terms of getting them actually implemented?
In terms of implementation, I think, especially when at a policy level, it doesn't start with the editor themselves. It should start with ownership. The owners of the media houses need to be able to understand the role that the media itself plays in the society. Where you have an owner or a proprietor who doesn't understand that I need to keep my hands off, the owning a media house or running a media house doesn't necessarily say that you need to influence every small detail of what is going to happen, of every editorial decision that's going to happen. Independence means that, yes, we understand that the media has got an owner, it's got everything, but you also have to understand that the role of the media, as outlined in the Constitution, we've been given this burden by the Constitution as a national value, as a national principle, that you can easily even go to court and say, for example, I want to sue the state media for not being independent. And you can do that. But if we have owners, proprietors who can be able to understand that there are key principles in terms of professionalism, there are key principles in terms of independence that we need to follow, I think we can make a lot of progress.
Indeed. We must end this discussion here because we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much, Patience, for coming through to this program and for sharing those insights.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Farah.
Patience Zirima is the Director of Media Monitors. Earlier, I spoke to Nigel Mugamu and Nigel Nyamutumbu. And that does it for this edition of the Rebound series, where we were focusing on the media sector, obviously in the wake of the Silver Jubilee of the Zimbabwe Independent, as well as World Press Freedom Day. My name is Farai Mwakutui. I'll be back again to do this at the very same time on these very same platforms. And I certainly hope that you can join me. Bye-bye.